knows that a recording has started. If you don't want to be recorded, please drop now. I'm going to start my PowerPoint today, and right now, actually. Um, so there we go. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is some new security management for Defender configuration, which is in public preview right now. So everybody can try it, test around, play with it. We suggest that when you test or play with it, start off with 1 or 2 devices and then move into more devices that's, after that. What we're going to talk about today, is um, explain what's new for you guys, understand how it works and, help you guys enable and troubleshoot some deployment stuff. And of course, I should have taken long, learn about supported scenarios and upcoming roadmap because I really can't talk too much about the roadmap, but this was a slide deck that was shared internally at Microsoft. I had to cut some of the stuff out just so everybody knows. So, real quick, from the marketing side, Microsoft security stack, we have things like antivirus, attack surface reduction, web protection, firewall, EDR, and network protection. This covers the entire stack. So Windows 10, Windows Server, Linux, Mac, mobile. Some of the stuff that's in public preview today is just around Windows. We do plan on expanding it outside of that as well. I think hopefully you've heard, there's been some talking about Linux showing up inside of Intune, and this is one of the reasons why it's coming from that perspective as well. Today, the way you actually manage a lot of this is, through things like Intune, ConfigMan, Microsoft Endpoint Manager, Group Policy, other third-party products as well. So what we think you want from a customer's perspective is simple, cross-platform way of pushing out settings. So like today, for instance, if you have a Windows server, or a non-domain joined or an unmanaged machine, you deploy Defender for Endpoint. You have no way of getting policy to that machine from the endpoint protection side of the house, from the firewall side of the house, unless you're doing things like group policy or local policy on those machines. We want something that's really easy, something that has, granular control, and it's constantly assessing and reporting back to you the state of that endpoint. So what we're introducing is Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Management, Endpoint Settings Management. We used to call it MDE Attach. It's not. So if you see some of the stuff inside of my either the deck or my demo environment, you'll understand why it's called MDE Attach. So again, this is basically what it looks like today. You've got Microsoft Endpoint Manager. You can co-manage SCCM with that. So you have an SCCM tenant attach, and it gives you the ability to have a single place to actually create those policies, but those devices have to be joined to either one of these 2 management systems in order to do that. What we're adding is the ability from a Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Security Configuration Management. And really how this works is when Microsoft Defender for Endpoint is onboarded onto that machine, or that machine's onboarded into MDE, we're going to look at that machine and say, how's this machine being managed? Is it managed, through Intune, ConfigMan, Group Policy? Okay, no, it's not. Then what we're going to do is we're actually going to register or join that device to Azure Active Directory. And everybody's like, but you're saying Windows servers. Well, believe it or not, the new servers, 2016, 2019, actually, sorry, 2019, 2022, 2023, and on can be Azure AD joined. The other ones have to be hybrid Azure AD joined. So they have to be part of on-prem domain and then registered. You don't have to go through the process of doing that for the newer operating systems. So like for my Windows Server 2022, I onboarded it, did a couple things just because we have to do some stuff in the public preview to get it to work. And then it automatically joined it to Azure Active Directory and then started pulling policy down from the Microsoft Endpoint Manager. You can see just from an MDE security configuration, the only things that it's going to manage is antivirus, firewall, and EDR policies. It's not going to do any of the other stuff that Microsoft Endpoint Manager or Intune can do from that aspect of it. So demo, let me start with a demo here. So a couple things that you'll have to do from the to get it to onboard, you have to make some changes inside of in here. You'll see allow Microsoft Defender endpoint to enforce security configurations. You have to turn this on. Also inside of Defender for Endpoint, there's a setting that you have to turn on there as well. So if we go down to settings here, inside of endpoints, and then down to enforcement scope for configuration management, you'll actually see where it says both Windows 10. It's taking a long time. There we go. Windows client devices, Windows server devices, and also enable it to devices that are being managed by Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Again, the plan on this is to open this up to other operating systems as well, but for today, it's just Windows client, Windows server. Then when you come back here, you're actually going to go into endpoint security. One of the things you'll notice when I click on all devices, you'll actually see managed by things like Intune and MDE. So obviously the ones that are being managed by MDE are just my unmanaged machines that I onboarded and put into the appropriate groups. You'll actually see I actually have a server 2000 here. So this is server 2022 that's inside of Intune right now, but it's only for the MDE portion in here. So when you look at things like device configuration, it'll show you, hey, these are the only 3 policies that took effect for it. So I did antivirus, EDR, and firewall. In here, you'll actually create a policy. It's easy enough to do, create new policy. You'll actually see selected platforms. So you'll see Windows 11 and Windows Server preview, select which profile, Defender for antivirus, and hit create. When I actually look in the policy that I've created, you'll see I've got 4 devices. I got one that's not applicable because it is a server 2012 R2 device, I believe, that I did not enable from a hybrid Azure join perspective. It'll show you the report. It'll show you all the different devices I have in here. And even from the server 22 side of the house, if you look at that, it'll show you all the different settings. This one says non-applicable because it is the intrusion prevention system. And the reason it's non-applicable is because I made that change inside of Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. So inside of here, one of the settings I turned on, advanced features, you'll see intrusion prevention. Where we at? Tamper protection, I turned that on here. If you turn that on here, no down level management can turn that off. That's the reason why it says not applicable. If you leave it off here, you have granularity whether you want to turn it on or off. I don't know why anybody would not want tamper protection turned on, but it does turn it on from that perspective. And then goes through all the pieces from there. Now, when you start to drill down a little bit deeper inside of Defender for Endpoint, you're going to see under device inventory, you'll see a new field that you can filter on, MDE. So I can actually come in here and filter on, and you'll actually see managed by Microsoft Endpoint Manager, MDE or unknown. And then I can group all those machines together there. We've also, under configuration management, created a new tile under configuration management called it onboarded via MDE security management. If you actually click on go to settings, it'll actually bring you directly to the settings that you have to where you go turn stuff on or off with inside MDE. Click up here, it'll actually open up Microsoft Endpoint Manager for you so you can go directly to there. But what it's going to do is give you your device count. You can see I've got 5 Windows client, 1 Windows server, and then I can actually view onboarded devices and it'll actually bring them all up and show you the success and whatnot from that aspect of it. And if anybody has any questions, please come off mute. Let me know. So enabling management settings, and I'll share this deck with you. I'll scrub a couple things that are in there that I probably shouldn't have in here um, from a public perspective, but you'll see the supported platforms today is Server 2019 Plus and Windows 10, new download level servers 2012 R2 and 2016. They have to be upgraded to the new management system. So not using the MMA agent. So not using that agent, but actually using the new one. That also upgrades them. So you don't have to use System Center Endpoint Protection for the AV. You're actually using Next Gen Cloud Protection. We talked about that a couple months back. This is one of the things that you have to do to get Server 2012 R2 and 2016 supported there. Licensing, obviously you need to be licensed, and of course PowerShell enabled because MS Sense. And if you're not familiar, MS Sense is the actual agent that's being used by Microsoft Endpoint Protection. We'll be running things through the PowerShell on those machines to get this enabled. The other thing is it does not support core. I don't know if we're going to support that in the future or not, but today it does not support Windows Server Core. The link is here, and again, I'll make sure you get those links. But the link is there. It goes through all the information on how to set everything up from that aspect of it. Azure AD requirements: the devices need to be hybrid Azure AD joined, or a Azure Active Directory domain joined. In some cases, schools that have a third-party IDP like Shibboleth, you're not going to be able to do this just because Shibboleth doesn't support WS-Fed, WS-Trust, and those protocols are needed for both hybrid Azure AD and Azure AD domain joined. For those that are not using it, a hybrid Azure AD joined is simple enough. You click a switch inside of Azure AD Connect and basically enable hybrid Azure AD joined, and it basically synchronizes the devices so they basically become domain joined and attached to Azure Active Directory. For machines that are not domain joined or hybrid Azure AD joined, the process will actually join them to Azure Active Directory and they will become Azure AD domain joined. There's it says here for hybrid Azure AD on Server 2012, you do need to create a Azure AD Connect sync rule, which is required. There is documentation inside the link that shows you how to do that. To get it enabled into public preview, I already showed you a couple places. So you do need to enable a role for manage endpoint security settings in Microsoft Endpoint Manager, which means if you do this by turning that on, whoever has access to Defender for Endpoint will actually be able to go into Microsoft Endpoint Manager and manage those settings as well. You also need to enable both of these. And there's a third place inside of Microsoft Defender for Cloud. I don't have that in the slides today to show you, but again, you turn it on for clients, devices, server devices. You'd seen the one section inside of Defender for Endpoint. I showed that, but there's also a setting inside of Microsoft Defender for Cloud. And then also over in the Microsoft Endpoint Manager, and it's basically just under the EDR policies or settings rather, where you turn that on. Just for the public preview, you do have to tag the devices as MDE management. When you look at the way I did it in mine, it's simple enough. All you have to do is click on the machine and then go ahead and go up and hit manage tags. I already have MDE managed there. The first time you go to do it, it won't be there. You'll have to create that tag, but once you create that tag, you can go ahead and add those tags to other machines. Again, this is only for the public preview. This is not something that you're going to need to do once it hits GA. And the reason they put this in there is just so that somebody didn't flip a switch and next, all their servers, all their machines and everything is being managed. And they weren't expecting that. So they put a couple of checks and balances in there to make sure that that did not happen. There's also best practices We have an MDE analyzer. There's a link in the deck to this so that you can actually look at this from an MDE perspective. Enable the feature, start with one device, as I had mentioned. Verify it appears in both Azure AD and Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Then you have to target it with a Microsoft Endpoint Manager policy. This means that you have to create a group inside of Azure AD and make that device part of that group inside of Azure AD, because when you create policies, you can only apply them to a group, not to an individual computer or server. And then, of course, confirm that device applied policy has been applied. Gradually expand to additional devices and OS platforms. Monitor progress with your MDE reports. Now, we do give you troubleshooting steps in here as well. We actually have a link for that. Excuse me. I already went through the new field, managed by enrollment status, error messages, etc. I didn't have any error messages in mind, so I've got some screenshots here to show you. Again, 7 devices failed to onboard using MDE. And then you can actually, like I showed you, hit the view all devices. And then once you do that, it'll show you all the different devices. It'll show you the different errors. There is some things that you can take actionable item on right away. Oh, and one thing to note about this here, because when you're looking at it with this filter of enrollment status, this is only for MDE managed machines. So when you look at the enrollment status, it's only going to show up for machines, or only have something populated from for an MDE perspective. There's some actionable items, so you can see, like this one, for instance, the device is onboarded to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, but encountered a connectivity issue. It means that there's possible firewall policies and rules, or you're blocking stuff on your edge firewalls. There is a couple different URLs that you need to enable for this to work. Again, it's inside the URL that was a couple screens back. You also can display inventory managed by the field from here as well. So you'll actually be able to see, managed by, and I showed you that there, and you can get directly to this. It's also going to be added to the device page in the future. So when you open up the device, it'll show you that inside the device page in Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Not there yet, but it will be. So some troubleshooting tools, we have the MDE Client Analyzer that you can use, and it'll actually show you some of this. So you can see domain joined, Azure domain joined, configuration details. It'll show you some of the guidance and error results that we're getting, and showing that from there.
And then where do you get to that? Because the client analyzer was a series of PowerShell tools previously, I thought.
Gotcha. So that would be this URL here. It's almost like I paid you to say that, but
That's right.
but it is. There is some PowerShell stuff that you run on the machine to enable that.
But you get a web UI, or was that just for, you were just showing us that?
I was just showing you that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's still via PowerShell though, right?
Correct.
Okay, I gotcha.
But these are the reports that it spits out. That's why I was showing you that. Again, some of the enrollment stuff, and you'll actually get links to all this, so you can actually look through all the different errors that you might possibly get depending on what the error is. Some stuff that's out of scope. So multi-tenant support, we do not support that, at least in the private preview. Domain controllers, we do not install this on your domain controllers. It's out of scope. It's out of support. I had mentioned already server core, the non-persistent VDIs, non-defender settings. So it's only going to do antivirus, firewall, and EDR settings, and any specific Microsoft Endpoint Manager settings when it comes to that. From a coexistence perspective, originally not planned, but we added it due to customer requests. So there's an optional MDE management that you can turn on, manage settings using configuration manager. Important notice: when enabled, policy conflicts can occur. It's important to only to use one control plane, for MDE settings. If anybody's using the configuration manager and they're using it in a co-management perspective, generally speaking, you go into the co-management pane and there's a little slide bar that you can slide over. This setting's not in there, and that's why we're bringing up that statement there, because there's nothing inside of there, because that would take a change for SCCM, and this is still public preview. So I'm assuming that this will make it to the co-management settings at some point, but it's not there right now. And thank you. Anybody have any questions, feedback, anything that they want me to dive in a little bit deeper to when it comes to that? Nothing? Anything in the chat that I missed? Yeah. It feels like Monday until it's not, right? All right. On that note, I guess we'll give everybody back about 12 minutes of their life. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. This way, if anybody wants to ask any questions,